we expose the cosmic conspiracy against mankind, the conspiracy of silence led by NASA, which keeps us all living in ignorance of the greatest revelation in human history, that we, mankind, are not alone in the universe, that within our own galaxy, thousands of life forms exist, which, like us, have the ability to build and fly craft which can travel from one planet to the other. The truth is that planet Earth has been invaded by aliens many times in the past. Rock art preserved from thousands of years ago clearly show aliens interacting with humans and animals. Himalayan legends tell of flying craft which exterminated whole regions of planet Earth using atomic weapons. Hostile aliens have invaded Earth many times, causing human civilization to crumble into dust, only to be rebuilt over thousands of years. We are not alone. We have never been alone. If you study the legends of the North American shamans, the mythologies of ancient Europe, the creation histories of the Australian Aborigines, or the ancient Vedic texts of India, and especially the Sumerian clay tablets from ancient Iraq, we find that all great civilizations on the face of planet Earth tell one similar story. That is, in the distant past, people from the stars visited planet Earth and displayed fantastic technology. Sometimes they genetically engineered humans. Sometimes they directly interbred with humans. These so-called sky gods always visited in spectacular flying vehicles.
And the watchers from the sky saw the daughter of man were beautiful, and they bred with them. And the children were giants, who become rulers, not of human flesh. They were called the Nephilim.
The most ancient written texts on planet Earth date from the Indus Valley and make up a corpus of works called the Vedas. The Bhagavad Gita is an ancient Hindu text which is at least 5,000 years old. The Bhagavad Gita described many gods of the stars flying down to planet Earth in alien spacecraft called Vimanas. The ancient Vedas tell us that there are multiple inhabited planetary systems in the universe called Devas, which are ruled by a universal government of beings with superhuman powers and technology. The most ancient text of Central America is the Popol Vuh, written by the Mayans who charted the heavens and had astronomical calendars which predicted solar and lunar eclipses. The Popol Vuh describes the ancestors of the Mayans as great explorers who knew centuries before European scientists that the Earth was not flat, but in actual fact a sphere. The Popol Vuh mentions a great god-king called Quetzalcoatl, who is depicted as a flying serpent.
We are teaching about the archons, the fallen angels. And they are called archons because they are the principalities of Ephesians chapter 6:12. Now, the word for principalities is in the Greek the word archons. And the archons are the world controllers. Jesus said all of the world is under the power of Satan. And the fallen angels carry out Satan's mission. And this is to control the world, to control societies, to create wars, to create crime, to bring people under control. And on the human level, they are mind controllers. And this is one of the most important concepts to understand. On the human level, they are mind controllers. They want to control your mind. And the way they do it is they minister false thoughts. And the false thoughts create a false reality in our minds. A false reality in our minds. And by doing this, they can manipulate us to do what they want us to do.
I'll tell you what's the worst part about television is the programming, the philosophy, okay? I mean, the manipulating of your mind, the philosophy, the mentality, the system of thinking, the ideology. That's what's wrong with television. That's what's wrong with movies. That's where they're really getting in your head. Take, for example, Walt Disney, right? And many people that will preach against the TV, they'll preach against the movies, they'll preach against Hollywood because it's obvious that stuff is bad. But then they'll say, well, we watch Disney movies. And I've been to the home of preachers and Christians who would never watch TV or the movies, but yet they have the whole library of the Walt Disney movies. You know those white plastic cases? And they have them all lined up. And I mean, they have tons of them lined up. Scores. I don't know how many there are, but there's hundreds of them. They have them lined up and lined up. And they have their kids watching those movies all day long. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to prove to you right now that those movies are wicked. Say, what? Disney movies? Come on, you're crazy. They're rated G. Well, let's see. First of all, did you know this? Did you know that Disney movies are filled with subliminal messages? Subliminal messages. Now, what are we talking about tonight? Sorcery. What are we talking about tonight? Getting inside your mind and messing with you. Controlling your thought process by supernatural means or demonic means. Or hey, I'm going to tell you something. Disney movies are filled with subliminal messages. And you say, oh, that's a hoax. I've seen it with my own eyes. When I was a teenager, I had a friend of mine sit me down at his house and show me the subliminal messages in the Disney movies. They're filled with subliminal messages. Let me give you some examples. The Lion King, filled with subliminal messages. Okay, all throughout the movie, there are pornographic pictures hidden in the movie. Like you'll be watching the movie and just for a few seconds, something filthy will come on. Like off to the side, there'll be some kind of a, reproductive anatomy will pop up, over here, and then over here. There's this one point where the lion, he kind of goes like this, and a cloud of dust comes up and just spells the word sex. And the word sex is put in the Lion King movie subliminally, literally hundreds of times. Hundreds of times. The shapes on the screen will spell the word. And I've seen it. I mean, I had my friend sit me down at his house and pausing the movie, showing me the word S-E-X popping up on the screen at different times because he knew where they were. And he would show me these things. Your kids are watching it and their mind is maybe not even seeing it, but it's going into their subconscious. Words flashing on the screen over and over. S-E-X, S-E-X, nudity, filth, just all the smut is just coming on the screen. Oh, those movies are harmless. They're filled with subliminal messages. Who knows what your kids are being programmed? Oh, but you know what? I'm sure that it's only just the Disney movies. I'll guarantee you it's the rest of Hollywood probably doing the same thing. And these Disney movies, at first when I was a teenager and somebody showed me this, I thought it was just a couple movies, a couple scenes, but as time has gone on, I've realized that virtually every Disney movie is packed with hundreds of subliminal messages to program the minds of your children.
It first started in 1967 when I found out that I had not gotten the big picture, even though I thought that I had it together. I just didn't have the complete pieces of the picture. This is a giant geo-psycho-political picture, and things are happening with the use of subliminal, indirect, and reverse psychological propaganda. It's made to be confusing by the evilarchy that controls not only the United States but Britain. This Illuminati, this group who call themselves the Enlightened Ones, had gained positions of power through control of the banking system.
On the back of the dollar bill, you see the symbol on the left-hand side of the bill, which is annuit coeptus, which means our enterprise is now a success, or our enterprise is crowned with success. Annuit coeptus. So you're saying, fine, so you have an enterprise and it's now crowned with success. What enterprise are you talking about? Novas ordo seclorum. Novas is novus, meaning new. Ordo is order, and seclorum is where we get the word secular, meaning the world. So it's new order of the world, the new world order. George Bush's new world order is now a success.
We've heard an awful lot of dramatic speeches and seen dramatic moments in times of great gravity for the nation. How would you assess this evening?
This was a stirring address, in my view, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
1934 is when the Federal Reserve actually finally took total control of the United States monetary system, and that's when they said it is now a success, because this is a symbol, this is an emblem of a secret society of Freemasons called the Illuminati, the German Bavarian Illuminati. They were a secret society founded in the south of Germany. They were called the Illuminati, the illuminated ones, the enlightened ones. Annuit coeptus, novus ordo seclorum, and that was in 1774 that the Bavarian Illuminati drew up their plans for what they were going to do in America and how they were going to do it. The triangle at the top with the light emanating from around it is Horus. And the 1776 at the bottom is 1776. A lot of people think it's because of the country being founded in 1776. It has nothing to do with that. As I said, this is on a document published back in 1774, 75, and then in 1776 the Roman numerals appeared on it in Europe. So what it amounted to is that the 1776 was when this secret society actually formed itself into a secret society and put itself into operation. They were the basis for what we call today in our country the Bavarian Illuminati was the basis for what we call today the Colombian faction. The Colombian faction of the Illuminati came here right after this government was formed, and that's where we get today this Columbia Space Shuttle, Columbia Movies, Columbia Television, Columbia Records, everything, Columbia University. As a matter of fact, Columbia TV, Columbia Broadcasting System, CBS. What is the symbol for CBS? It's the all-seeing eye. And that's why our government is in the District of Columbia, because these guys own our government. They print our money, and they own not only the government, but they own you. You are their property. So, in other words, these guys print the money, they run the country, and they own you, and they own everything around it. And so they make the laws, and that's why they can decide who can kill who, and who can get away with who, and who can get away with whatever, because they make the laws and they decide, all right? As I said to you before, there are 13 layers in this pyramid. There are 13 letters in ENERGISE, but 13 is a very important number to this secret society. There are 13 stripes. There are 13 stars here, which make up the Star of David. The 13 berries, there are 13 leaves, 13 arrows. There are 32 feathers here and 33 feathers there. Everything is done in a sequence of 13. 13, of course, is based on, this is what we call Masonic symbolism. Freemasons designed this dollar bill. Everything is done in a sequence of 13, and again, I draw your attention to the fact that you have 13 stars here, which collectively make up the Star of David. There's a reason why. On the $1 bill at the top, you'll see this little image right here, but if you blow it up from an actual photograph, you'll see it is it's a little owl. It's a symbol of the Bohemian Society. The Bohemian Society meets in California on the last 2 weeks of July of every year. I have pictures showing all of the presidents, all of the living presidents, excluding the new one, but all of the living presidents at Bohemian Grove in Northern California, and they're all wearing red and black Ku Klux Klan dress type of regalia, like the Ku Klux Klanners, with the pointed headdress and everything. And, I mean, that's quite a sight to see presidents dressed like Ku Klux Klan members, right? And they're standing in front of a big open pit of fire, and behind them is about a 20 to 25-foot owl behind them. And the article in Elm magazine and Time magazine, I've got 2 or 3 different magazines showing basically the same pictures. It says that the presidents meet with all of the heads of industry throughout the world, all of the heads of state throughout the world, and all of the most important wheeler dealers in this country, and they all meet up in Northern California, and they have rituals where they go before the owl after midnight. And what a picture you got, with all the presidents dressed up like Ku Klux Klanners with black and red robes on before an owl. And these are your presidents of this country. And the reason why they chose the owl is because the owl is a symbol used in Europe by secret societies, because the owl is wise, because it sees things in the dark. And the implication is, of course, that's why they are where they are, because they're very brilliant and they know things that you don't know.
Thanks to you, the Illuminati had the goods to cut themselves in. They've been organized crime's silent partner ever since.
Young man, how long have you been plagued by these fanciful delusions?
Not as long as you've had this tattoo.
Did the world wars, revolutions, and big events of human history evolve naturally, or were they calculated and pre-planned? If they were pre-planned, who planned them, and what are they planning for the future of humanity? The Vatican rules over approximately 2 billion of the world's 6.1 billion people. The colossal wealth of the Vatican includes enormous investments with the Rothschilds in Britain, France, and the USA, and with giant oil and weapons corporations like Shell and General Electric. The Vatican solid gold bullion worth billions is stored with the Rothschild-controlled Bank of England and the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank. The Catholic Church is the biggest financial power, wealth accumulator, and property owner in existence, possessing more material wealth than any bank, corporation, giant trust, or government anywhere on the globe. The Pope, who is the visible ruler of this colossal global wealth, is one of the richest men on earth. While 2/3 of the world earns less than $2 a day, and 1/5 of the world is underfed or starving to death, the Vatican hoards the world's wealth, profits from it on the stock market, and at the same time preaches about giving. How did the Pope and Vatican accumulate all that wealth over the millennium? One method was to put a price tag on sin. Many bishops and popes actively marketed guilt, sin, and fear for profit by selling indulgences. Worshippers were encouraged to prepay for sins they hadn't yet committed and get pardoned ahead of time. Those who didn't pay up risked eternal damnation in Satan's oven. Pope Leo X rebuilt St. Peter's Basilica, selling tickets out of hell and tickets to heaven. During the Dark Ages, the Catholic Church not only hoarded the wealth they collected from the poor, but hoarded knowledge. They kept the masses ignorant and in the dark by denying them a basic education.
More than 60,000 armed Christians were on their way to reclaim Jerusalem from the infidel.
Between 1095 and 1291 AD, the Pope launched 7 bloodbaths called the Christian Crusades, torturing, burning, beheading, and mass murdering hundreds of thousands of Muslims and Jews in the name of God. The Pope's brutal soldiers were called Knights Templar, or Knights of the Temple of Solomon, and evolved into today's secretive brotherhood called the Freemasons. Between 1450 and 1700 AD, the Catholic Church followed up their holy terror with the Inquisition. Based on rumors of practicing witchcraft, the Catholic Church hunted down, tortured, and burned alive millions of innocent women at the stake. During World War II, the Vatican was criticized for supporting Hitler and his Nazi regime. To this day, the Vatican is still under investigation for plundering Nazi gold from the Swiss bank accounts of Jewish Holocaust victims. Over the past 5 decades, more than 1,500 priests and bishops have been identified in the sexual assault of tens of thousands of boys and girls in their trusting congregations and orphanages. Why is this filthy rich institution preaching spiritual values of poverty and chastity while cardinals, bishops, and priests cover up their crimes of sexual abuse? Why has the Church fought and resisted the compensation claims of their sexually, emotionally, and spiritually traumatized victims? Like Vatican City, London's inner city is also a privately owned corporation or city-state, located right smack in the heart of Greater London. It became a sovereign state in 1694 when King William III of Orange privatized and turned the Bank of England over to the bankers. By 1812, Nathan Rothschild crashed the English stock market and scammed control of the Bank of England. Today, the city-state of London is the world's financial power center and the wealthiest square mile on the face of the earth. It houses the Rothschild-controlled Bank of England, Lloyd's of London, the London Stock Exchange, all British banks, the branch offices of 385 foreign banks, and 70 U.S. banks. It has its own courts, its own laws, its own flag, and its own police force. It's not part of Greater London or England or the British Commonwealth and pays no taxes. The city-state of London houses Fleet Street's newspaper and publishing monopolies. It is also the headquarters for worldwide English Freemasonry and headquarters for the worldwide money cartel known as the Crown. Contrary to popular belief, the Crown is not the royal family or the British monarch. The Crown is the private corporate city-state of London. It has a council of 12 members who rule the corporation under a mayor called the Lord Mayor. The Lord Mayor and his 12-member council serve as proxies or representatives who sit in for 13 of the world's wealthiest, most powerful banking families. This ring of 13 ruling families includes the Rothschild family, the Warburg family, the Oppenheimer family, and the Schiff family. These families and their descendants run the Crown Corporation of London. The Crown Corporation holds the title to worldwide Crown land in Crown colonies like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The British Parliament and the British Prime Minister serve as a public front for the hidden power of these ruling Crown families. Like the city-state of London and the Vatican, a third city-state was officially created in 1982. That city-state is called the District of Columbia and is located on 10 square miles of land in the heart of Washington. The District of Columbia flies its own flag and has its own independent constitution. Although geographically separate, the city-states of London, the Vatican, and the District of Columbia are one interlocking empire called Empire of the City. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This treasonous act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens.
He was best known as a popular BBC sports presenter, but by the time he'd appeared on Wogan, his life had taken a dramatic change. Have a look at this.
So evil has been in control of the planet for 12,000 years?
It has been the dominating force. Evil's not the right word, it is imbalance. But it has been increasingly in control. As I repeat, survey the world, ladies and gentlemen. Is the force of love in control of this world, guiding this planet at this time? Of course not. The negativity, the thoughts that I'm talking about that are very destructive, are pouring out of this planet
let me
every
interrupt
day.
you. Was it a great shock for you to discover this at 38?
Well, I think the word is gobsmacked. But again, you know, the best way of removing negativity is to laugh and be joyous. So I'm delighted that there's so much laughter in the audience tonight.
But no,
but just let me say this.
They're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you.
Fine.
I didn't mean that to be hurtful. I don't want you to misinterpret it. They're not laughing in sympathy with you.
So while 15 years ago he was ridiculed for his prophecies about natural disasters around the world, and now he has a controversial new view about who really is running the world. I'm delighted that he's agreed to come back. David Icke.
Thank you, no problem.
Now, again, when I see that, I'm slightly embarrassed by it because I thought I was a bit sharp with that comment. So, and at the time I said I didn't mean it to embarrass you. So, that interview at the time, it changed everything for you, didn't it?
Well, it changed everything in the sense of I couldn't walk down any street in Britain without being laughed at by most of the people. Going in a pub, there was uproar. A comedian only had to say my name to get a laugh. And what that does is it reveals to you the level of immaturity that passes for adulthood in this country, whereby clearly a guy was going through an incredible experience. And instead of being mature and saying, why is this guy gone from being this, what you would call straight, normal television presenter, to how he is now? This is interesting. What's happening here? Instead, and I heard the ripples of laughter 16 years on when my name was mentioned. People just laughed. But the other, which gave me a real insight, especially given what I'm doing now in my books, about how easy it is for the few to control the many. Because the many, you know, we laugh at sheep because sheep just follow the one in front. Ah, stupid sheep. We humans have out-sheeped the sheep because at least the sheep need a sheepdog to keep them in line. Humans keep each other in line. And they do it by ridiculing or condemning anyone who commits the crime, because that's what it's become, of being different.
The ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one-world government run by the banking industry, run by the bankers, and they're doing it in sections. The European currency, the euro, and the European Constitution is one part of it. Now they're trying to do it in America with the North American Union.
Eric, can you be specific about when you met Rockefeller, how it happened in these discussions?
I met Rockefeller through a female attorney I knew who called me up one day and said, one of the Rockefellers would like to meet you. I had made a video called Mad as Hell, and he'd seen the video and wanted to meet me and knew I was running for governor of Nevada. So sure, I'd love to meet him. And I met him, and I liked him, and he was a very, very smart man. And we used to talk and share ideas and thoughts. And he's the one who told me 11 months before 9/11 ever happened that there was going to be an event. Never told me what the event was going to be, but there was going to be an event, and out of that event, we were going to invade Afghanistan to run pipelines from the Caspian Sea. We were going to invade Iraq, you know, to take over the oil fields, establish a base in the Middle East, and make it all part of the New World Order. And we go after Chavez in Venezuela. And sure enough, later 9/11 happened, and I remember he was telling me how how you're gonna see soldiers looking in caves for people in Afghanistan and Pakistan and all these places, and there's gonna be this war on terror, of which there's no real enemy, and the whole thing is a giant hoax, you know, but it's a way for the government to take over the American people.
He told you it was going to be a hoax.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's no question. He says, there's going to be war on terror. And he's just laughing. There's no... Who are we fighting? I mean, why do you think 9/11 happened and then nothing's happened since then? Do you think that our security is so great here that these people who pulled off 9/11 who are able to can't knock down another plane. Come on, it's ridiculous. Endless war on terror without any real enemy. That you can never, so you can never define a winner.
And did he say that it's going to be perfect because you can't define an enemy? It just goes on
Yeah,
and on?
because you can't define a winner. There's no one to beat, so it goes on and on forever. And they can do whatever they want. They scared the hell out of the American public. Look, this whole war on terror is a fraud. It's a farce. It's very difficult to say it out loud because people are intimidated against saying it. Because if you say it, they want to make you into a nutcase. But the truth has to come out. That's why I'm doing this interview. The fact of the matter happens to be that the whole war on terror is a fraud. It's a farce. Yeah, there's a war going on in Iraq because we invaded Iraq. And people over there fighting, you know. But the war on terror, that's a joke, you know. And until we discover what really happened on 9/11 and who was responsible for 9/11, because that's where the war on terror emanates from. That's where it comes from. It was 9/11 that allowed this war on terror to begin. And until we get to the bottom root of 9/11, the truth of 9/11, we'll never know about the war on terror.
The 9/11 attack on America looked so much like a formula action-packed Hollywood disaster movie that it had "Made in the USA" written all over it. The only difference is it used real props and real people. It had terrorist villains, American firefighter heroes, fireball explosions, collapsing buildings, pedestrians chased by dust clouds, and it even had a God Bless America music score. Well-positioned cameras shot the action-packed drama from every conceivable angle.
Just the picture of the helicopter landing and the president walking in, and then the 19 hijackers had been Saudi nationals. So in the terrible... He said that he didn't believe that Osama bin Laden... No one has blamed or accused him formally.
That how many people worked in the building? The city is confirming that some 265 firefighters are believed.
None of us will ever forget this day.
People will knock these buildings down. We'll hear all of it soon.
America Remembers, Sunday, 83rd.
The timing, the title, and the eerie advertisement for Harvey Weinstein's Lord of the Rings movie called The Two Towers was a prophetic and disturbing coincidence. Profits from the Two Towers movie were small change compared to the 9/11 reality disaster movie, which has become the world's top-grossing production of all time. The only thing missing are the 9/11 producer, writer, and director credits. But it doesn't take an Enron accountant to figure out who's cashing in. During the first week, the 911 producers made a spectacular fortune just on the stock market alone. How? By knowing in advance that the stocks in airline and insurance companies associated with the 911 crash would fall in value. Using that inside information, they made negative bets on the stock market called put options. Put options are bets that a certain stock will fall in value by a certain date. It's big risk gambling, unless you've got inside information that can turn your bet into a sure thing. But that's illegal if you get caught at it. Put option bets on the decline in 911 related airline and insurance stocks skyrocketed by a whopping 600% just before 911, which means that somebody knew about the attacks before they happened. Who exactly were those somebodies? Merrill Lynch and HSBC, Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, the Bank of America, weapons manufacturer Raytheon, the Lehman Brothers, General Motors, Swiss Re, Munich Re, and AXA Re Insurance Company, which owns 25% of American Airlines. These insiders bought put options through Deutsche Bank.
Most demanding clients trust Deutsche Bank to perform. Deutsche Bank, a passion.
Buzzy Krongard, the former executive director of the CIA, just happened to be the manager of Deutsche Bank. And so the profiteers from 911 were not Osama bin Laden or his band of U.S.-trained Arabs. They were blue-chip Israeli, U.S., and British businessmen. Within the first week, the 911 producers sucked up $40 billion in box office profits from U.S. taxpayers who were hypnotized, terrorized, and traumatized by the infinite reruns.
Think of it as a conspiracy theory true or false test. A. When George W. Bush started his first oil company, who helped fund it? Osama bin Laden's brother and brother-in-law. True or false? B. After a terrorist bomb at a barracks in Saudi Arabia killed 19 Americans, who got the multi-million-dollar contract to rebuild? The bin Ladens. True or false? C. On the morning of September 11, 2001, who was in a meeting at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Washington? George Bush Sr. and Osama bin Laden's brother. True or false? Actually, the answer could be D, all of the above. Because believe it or not, as far-fetched as they sound, each and every one of those things, the bin Laden link to the Bush Oil Company, the bin Laden construction contract after the terrorist bomb, and the bin Laden-Bush meeting on 9/11, is true.
Many of the facts surrounding the events of 9/11 point to a cover-up, like the fact that the Bush administration ignored all of the advance warnings of the 9/11 attacks. Warnings from FBI agents like Colleen Rowley and from the famous Phoenix memo were not only ignored, they were suppressed. FBI Deputy Director John P. O'Neill quit his job when his investigation of Osama bin Laden was blocked. According to a September 24th Newsweek article, top Pentagon officials canceled their travel plans for 9/11 because of security concerns. While the American public were sitting ducks, all of America's political, military, and corporate VIPs were kept out of harm's way. Two Muslims accused of the 9/11 hijackings took their flight training at Rudy Decker's Huffman Aviation School in Florida. Rudy Decker's is linked to the CIA and drug smuggling through Carib Air and Britannia Aviation, which shared the same small Venice airport with Decker's. The media reported that on the night before the attacks, accused ringleader Mohammed Atta and two other Muslim hijackers got drunk, fondled naked dancers in a Florida strip club called Shuckums, forgot their business card and their Quran holy book at the bar, publicly bashed America, and loudly boasted about impending bloodshed the next day. Would devoted and highly secretive Muslim hijackers risk their planned mission by attracting so much negative attention? And why were they in Florida instead of Boston the night before their suicide flights? On the early morning of September 11th, 19 Muslim men well known to intelligence and security agencies supposedly waltzed past airport security checks, boarded 4 passenger planes, and turned them into deadly missiles without even a hitch. By 8:13 a.m., flight controllers temporarily lost radar contact with American Airlines Flight 11 and reported a suspected hijacking. Even though Andrews Air Force Base is only 10 minutes from Washington, emergency response fighter jets took close to an hour instead of the typical 15 minutes to scramble and begin searching for the hijacked planes. By then, it was too late. President Bush already knew about the first Flight 11, which occurred at 8:46 a.m., when he sat down to chat with school kids at Booker Elementary School. It wasn't until 9:05 a.m. that he was notified that a second plane, Flight 175, had also crashed into the World Trade Center and that America was under attack. Instead of being whisked to safety in this national emergency, Bush nodded and continued chatting with the kids for another 20 minutes about a pet goat, while American citizens were burning alive and leaping to their death from the smoking towers.
Wailing against the wind as they fell, almost as if they had second thoughts. I was absolutely horrifying.
And you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to wonder exactly what President George W. Bush knew about the attack, and when he knew it. According to the official White House version, it was at this moment in a Florida classroom that Bush learned the second plane had hit the World Trade Center and that the U.S. was under attack. But here's what George Bush himself said almost 3 months later when asked about September 11th.
I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. The TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And I said it must have been a horrible accident. But I was whisked off there and didn't have much time to think about it.
Now wait a minute. George Bush was told about the second plane while he was inside the classroom. So you just heard him describe seeing the first plane crash on television that day. But that's impossible. No one saw the first plane crash on TV on September the 11th because the videotape of it didn't surface until the next day.
At 9:55 a.m., President George W. Bush took off in Air Force One with no escort or protection from fighter jets and circled around for the next hour. Why was the president's plane airborne and unescorted for an entire hour while hijacked planes were roaming the skies? The inexperienced hijacker pilots who took only a simulated flying course reportedly flew the third hijacked plane, Flight 77, into a Top Gun 270-degree turn, bypassed the offices of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and crashed into an insignificant part of the Pentagon that was under renovation. Emergency response Air Force fighter jets were finally airborne when a fourth hijacked plane, Flight 93, crashed into a field in Pennsylvania at 10:06 a.m. The media reported that passengers overpowered the hijackers, but nearby residents saw U.S. fighter jets overhead and gave eyewitness reports of debris falling from the sky. That debris was found 8 miles away, indicating that the plane had been shot down. Within hours of the 911 hijackings, a massive Blame the Muslims campaign was launched by CNN and the media and continues to this day. In less than 48 hours, the names and mugshots of 19 accused Muslims were flashed across TV screens. If government investigators knew nothing, how did they identify 19 Muslim men as the hijackers so fast, from fake passports and with no DNA evidence? How could Muhammad Atta's passport survive the fireball explosion that supposedly cremated him, fly out of his pocket, fly out of the incinerated plane, flutter to the ground into 2 feet of debris, and end up in readable condition in the hands of investigators, all within 48 hours? Why did 19 Muslim men even need passports on domestic flights? How were passports found but not the plane's voice recorders? Why did the hijackers need passports they would never use again after their suicide flights? And why were the 19 accused Muslims not under surveillance on 911 if they were so easy to identify? The suitcase of accused ringleader Muhammad Atta was never loaded onto the hijacked plane and conveniently fell right into the hands of investigators. It was jam-packed with incriminating evidence, including a Quran, a how to fly a commercial airplane video, and a fuel consumption indicator. Why would a hijacker about to die on a suicide mission pack a suitcase? It seems Muhammad Atta was a very forgetful ringleader who carried around a lot of Quran holy books. He reportedly forgot one Quran in a Florida strip club, another in a rental car, and still another one in his lost suitcase at the airport. More incriminating evidence of flight manuals written in Arabic were found within hours of the attacks in parked rental cars at the airports. Why didn't the terrorists take a taxi to the airport? Can they be that smart and that stupid at the same time? The conspicuous trail of planted evidence continued 3 weeks after the 911 attacks, when anthrax letters killed 5 people and were clearly worded to throw the blame on Muslims. Death to America, death to Israel, Allah is great. It has since been proven that the anthrax came from a U.S. Army lab and was never mailed by Muslims. Were the 19 Muslims accused of the hijacking set up as patsies and framed? If so, who set them up? Right after the attacks, CNN deceptively and repeatedly showed an airport security video of Muhammad Atta. CNN neglected to tell viewers that the video showed Muhammad Atta boarding a plane at Portland, Maine, not the hijacked plane. There are no airport security videos of any of the 19 accused Muslims boarding any of the hijacked planes.
City officials are describing as the worst act of destruction since the World Trade Center bombing.
It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
A network of reptilian creatures have infiltrated the world's government, media, and entertainment industry.
They have taken the hearts and minds of our leaders. They have recruited the rich and the powerful, and they have blinded us to the truth. Our human spirit is corrupted. Why do we worship greed? Because outside the limit of our sight, feeding off us, perched on top of us from birth to death, are our owners. Our owners. They have us. They control us. They are our masters. Wake up. They're all about you, all around you.
Our impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices. Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain.
This is programming, and David Icke talks about this, a societal programming wherein we are conditioned to hate and fear this subject so much that without something extra, without something more unusual happening to us to cause us to search for this darker truth, people will be inclined not to see it even if it's right in front of their face, which is what I've experienced. And even people in my own family and people that I know very well and people who were interested in ufology, when they saw this, either didn't see it or became very upset about it.
In the early 90s, when we were first learning about the reptilians, you tended to hear about cases of rape and situations like that, and almost like an instinctive fear that some people had in response to just being in their presence, just like a physiological reaction to them. So I think all of those factors, plus the bad reputation of snakes in Judeo-Christian mythology, has given them sort of a bad reputation, and that led to maybe a bit of a taboo in discussing them, but I don't think that the taboo is really necessary.
I was in America on a speaking tour. I say a speaking tour in those days. A speaking tour largely meant talking to myself. You know, I mean, I went to Chicago and spoke to 8 people, or near Chicago anyway. But on that speaking tour, over a period of about 15 days, I met 12 separate people, and I was going to a different place every day, who told me the same basic story, how they'd seen humans turn into a reptilian form and then back again. And it was such a common theme that they were describing that I started exploring from that time. So it came into my life very quickly. I'd kind of heard like little mentions of it before and just let it go. But in this 15-day period, that really focused my mind. So there's something to look at here. When you're faced with that situation with, or you know, one person after another in different parts of America telling you the same thing, you can either go I'm not going there. What will people say if I start talking about this stuff? Or you can say, information's my guide, I'm going there. What then happened is I came back from there to the Isle of Wight, and I was meeting someone, actually not very far from here, who had been married to a Satanist, who had been the warden for Burnham Beeches. Burnham Beeches, out west of London, is owned by the City of London, the financial district. And it is a big place of Satanism and very strange happenings. It's wooded copses and few open areas. And she asked to meet me because what I was writing about, because she wanted to tell me about the Satanism which she experienced. And she told me when I met her about seeing Ted Heath, former Prime Minister of Britain, took us into the European Union, doing a satanic ritual at Burnham Beeches, because she lived there in the warden's house. And when this conversation was finished, and I was having a cup of tea, and I was just finished my tea, and I was putting it down and turning to go, and I just said to her as a throwaway line, I've just come back from America, and I met all these people that kept telling me how they'd seen people turning to reptiles. And I heard her first, and I turned around. She's going, oh my God, I wasn't going to tell you about that. She said what happened was she saw lights, and she took the dog out that night. And then she went through and looked through the trees at this light, and she saw Heath in this circle. And she said what she then saw was Heath shift into a reptilian form and grow about 2 feet, which is absolutely common in descriptions of this all over the world. And she said he started speaking then in a voice a bit like, she described it as a bit like the old transatlantic telephone conversations when there was gaps. And she said the thing that shocked her more than anything else is that when this happened, no one in the circle moved in any way that related to shock or surprise. It seemed to them the most common thing you could imagine. And from the American experience, and that lady too,
one of the important things throughout all of their interaction with humanity was not to be recognized and not to be seen. Because humans record in stone. We're very good at that. We create. We're fantastic like that as a race. So they recreate, and the reptilians didn't want that. You will see it occasionally in some of the Sumerian or Assyrian, Babylonian carvings. Occasionally, you will also see it in some of the Mayan or Aztec items. What you're much more likely to see are renditions of feline species from the Egyptian times, because they weren't covered by the same protocol. So they weren't, there was no ban on depicting them, whereas there is a ban, there still is now a ban on depicting reptilians, and I'll give you absolute proof of that when I did that very nice interview on the Today programme with Holly Willoughby and Schofield. And I did 2 drawings, one of a mantid and one of a reptile, and I was told point blank we're not allowed to put the reptile up because they were going to have me as a backdrop, them as a backdrop to me. So the stills I've got, which they very kindly sent me, I'm being interviewed with them, and behind me is a picture of the mantid. But originally, Schofield and gang were going to have the mantid and the reptile, and somebody very high up said we're not allowed. They didn't even know what it was called. All they said to me was, we've been told we can't put this one up. So there's a blanket that goes out, and hence, if you think about what your title of this DVD is, because we're coming round to that now, and you think about that chapter in The Greatest Secret that David Icke wrote, which was don't mention the reptiles, and that's a fact, and David is absolutely right, that the system doesn't want to publicise them because they have signed an agreement not to publicise them. It's to keep them out. So you can talk about the greys as much as you want. That's not an issue. You can talk about the mantids as much as you want, because they don't manipulate humanity. The reptile race that we're talking about manipulates humanity and has done for thousands of years, and has a covenant with the elite humans who run the world that they will always be in the shadows.
I'm David Icke from England. I went through an extraordinary series of what you might call paranormal experiences, not that they were, 20 years ago in 1990 and 89, and basically the veil lifted and I saw the world in a completely different way, and I started on a journey of research which has led me over 20 years to a very obvious conclusion that this world is controlled by very, very few people behind the people we think are in power, and they have a very, very malevolent agenda for humanity as a whole, who to them are nothing more than cattle. For the last 20 years, there's been demonstrably, blatantly, obviously, a fantastic awakening, and it's getting faster and faster all the time. I first of all noticed a big change after 9/11. Although the vast majority of people bought the official line, there was something about it that started to get others to think and come off the fence. And when the weapons of mass destruction were not found in Iraq, it was almost like a confirmation. You know, people talk about, well, you must never believe what the government says, you must never believe what the media says, but so many people just go ahead and do that. And the lack of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq were like somebody reminding you, see, look, governments lie. And after 2003 and all that, this awakening, this questioning of the world, this questioning of authority got more and more blatant. And as the police state and the Orwellian state is breaking the surface ever more obviously, it's getting more and more people to see the world in a way that they wouldn't have done before. And it's getting faster and faster, and it's a great time to be doing what we're doing, putting this information out, and it's very, very encouraging. The whole conspiracy is founded on keeping humanity in a very, very low level of perception about self, perception about the world. This is why we have the dumbing down of education. This is why we have the controlled so-called information that comes through the media. The idea is to keep people in ignorance of anything that would be a problem to the control system. So we're kept in ignorance about the nature of reality itself, the nature of life itself, who we are, where we are, what we're doing here. We're kept in ignorance of the true forces that are manipulating behind the people we see in the public arena, like we had 8 years of Bush, who was blatantly just a figurehead signing his name on the legislation, and he's been replaced by Obama, who is another blatant figurehead doing the same, controlled by the same force, ultimately, that controlled Bush. Now, all these connections have to be kept from people so that we behave and perceive the world and everything in the way that suits the control system. So any awakening, any opening of the mind to see things that people didn't see before is a real big problem for the conspiracy, for the manipulators. And what we're seeing now, as more and more people are awakening, is almost a panic-stricken attempt to put the lid on this, to dumb people down. And this is one reason why we're seeing the ever greater drugging of American children, not just American children, but in the wider world too, while we're seeing more and more of these chemical cocktails in food that destabilize the body's chemical balance, and more electromagnetic pollution to destabilize the body's electromagnetic balance. All of these things fundamentally affect the way people see the world and their ability to think sharply, to think straight, and to see the peripheral vision which you need to see what's actually going on. They want us here. And what an awakening mind does is start to do this. And when you do that, you start to connect dots that you can't actually see here. What we're looking at now is an irresistible force, I would suggest, which is the gathering awakening of humanity coming face to face with what thinks it's the immovable object, the conspiracy, but isn't, as we'll see, although it's going to take some years before that becomes obvious. And so we're at this fork in the road where people have to choose. Are they going to go on being controlled sheep and robots of the control system, or are they going to wake up and take the road to freedom? That's the fork in the road, and that's the choice that people are facing now and will face ever more blatantly in the next few years. When you look at the bloodline families and the control system that they oversee, it seems that they are all-powerful. They control the media ownership level and at key positions within it. They control the corporations, the cartels of oil, of pharmaceuticals, etc. They control the forces of law enforcement and the military, ultimately. But one thing they don't control is the numbers. This is what humanity has. It has vast numbers of people, enormous numbers of people, compared with those at the core of the control system that actually know exactly what they're doing and what the agenda is. They are tiny in number compared with what is now supposed to be 7 billion people on the planet. So one of the agendas to bring this under greater control for them is to massively cull the population. They want to reduce the numbers. Now, if you want to remove lots of people, you can do it by injecting stuff into people's arms and they just keel over dead. But if you do that, and of course there is some of that goes on, but if you do that, are the other people lined up are going to say, excuse me, I ain't having whatever they've had. So you do it in a more subtle way, and you target the defense mechanism that everyone has called the immune system. For instance, people don't die of AIDS. They die of AIDS-related disease, which are diseases that the immune system, before it becomes shot, would have defended the body from. So all the time now we're having the immune system targeted, not least among children and young people, by vaccinations, by food additives and drink additives, etc. And if we just think about this, I mean, it's so blatant. If people just take a deep breath and take a step back and look at it with a bit of peripheral vision, we have a situation now, not just in America, but in Britain and the wider world, where between birth and about 2 years of age, we're having children be given 25 and rising different vaccinations and combinations of them, poured in all this, these chemical cocktails that destabilize the body, but more important than that, they have to be dealt with by a still developing immune system. So the immune system's still developing, it's still coming up to optimum efficiency, and suddenly this tidal wave of chemical concoctions is thrown at it and has to deal with it. As it's dealing with one, suddenly another one comes. 25 vaccinations over the first 2 years of life. It is, by any level of common sense, it's ludicrous, and it's meant to be ludicrous because it's targeting the immune systems of young children, which, because it's done at a developing time in the immune system, rewires it, destabilizes it, imbalances it for the rest of their lives. Those kids' immune system will never be as efficient as it would have been otherwise.
The cost of outfitting each combat troop with a tracking device is one of the main reasons they don't have them right now.
So when you speak with
But others say if they can deal with the cost and pay for all of this, it is worth it not only to track missing troops.
For example, she says, it appears Brittany is suffering from a major psychological disorder and that it might actually be bipolar. Could be that. The doc then predicts how much longer they'll live. Sick, I know, but I also know you want to hear what she has to say. The doc says if these people don't get help or straighten up fast, I haven't pre-read any of this. Brittany won't make it to the age 30, Lindsay won't see 25, and Michael Jackson has no more than 5 years left. At the other end, Angelina's going to have a long, healthy life, and so will George Bush and Nicole Richie.
If you're not already bipolar.
I hear yelling in the booth. Are they yelling at me for the way I read that?
No, you did great.
Okay.
But if you're not...
Wait, excuse me.
I could hear Lisa yelling
Give her a break. She didn't read it earlier. She doesn't know the story. It's okay. Just stop it. She's okay.
I could hear you.
Yeah. Some expert who doesn't know any of them making comments on how long they live than we did on Iraq today, okay?
Are you trying to make me feel bad?
Talking with teenagers and students about Anna and the other kids I met in Latin America, and so far it's been really inspiring.
And not unpleasant. I mean,
well, we'll change all that.
No, we're not going to change that.
Don't change it, please.
We will not change it. We will not.
She obviously hasn't seen the show.
People have been nice, and they're not attacking your dad or his policies to you.
Well, I met with my job. I worked for UNICEF, which is an amazing organization that works in over 150 countries. And my job was to meet with teenagers who were living in exclusion, who were living in extreme poverty or living with HIV, and write their stories, listen to their stories and write them for UNICEF. And so, I mean, I obviously learned so much from these kids. I learned from Anna in particular, who has lived an extremely difficult life. I learned to live each day to its fullest.
Doing any kind of missionary work, I think, really changes a person. And you and your sister had a little bit, I mean, you guys weren't Paris Hilton, but you had a little bit of a reputation as party girls. Do you think this changed you?
and I don't do it through debates. I don't need to debate any Christian. I was a Christian. I am a Muslim. If you want, I can give you both sides, easy. But he will ask you if you delivered the message. I'll play both parts. I'll be the Christian and tell you this, and then I'll be the Muslim and give the answer. You were at a place and you saw somebody change their religion to another religion in the temple of that religion, and the father was the priest there, what would you think?
in Colombo in Sri Lanka. It's full. You literally, I don't know how they're going to get all the crates.
Could this prove that the Bushes are reptilians? And if so, does this mean that similar creatures have been running the US government?
During Barack Obama's speech at 2012 APAC Policy Conference at the Washington Convention Center, the cameras spotted a very odd individual, who may be either with the US Secret Service, or with the Israels, and could be a strong evidence of a shapeshifter alien humanoid working for the powers that be, caught in a high-definition video during an event of the Zionist cabal.
4 years ago, I stood before you and said that Israel's security is sacrosanct. It is non-negotiable. That belief has guided my actions as president.
Even though at first sight he looks just like the average Secret Service spook, a series of odd features on his head, face, plus a very strange behavior and creepy movements, suggest something else. But due to the low lighting in half the amphitheater, he would pass unnoticed or regarded as a normal human being by the crowd, and everybody who watched this video, if it was not by the camera of the Jewish News One, which caught him from another angle apparently shape-shifting into some sort of reptilian non-human form. Disregard all the distortions and image artifacts caused by post-edition zooming, and pay close attention to how his head features suddenly change. His ears, his nose, his chin, cheekbone, jaw and mouth are no longer looking human at all. Matter of fact, now he has a blatant non-human face. So what just happened? Did his shape-shifting device fail during Obama's speech, in the middle of an amphitheater crowded with people? Is he an actual reptilian humanoid? Is he one of the Anunnaki? Is he a tall grey bio-android, or what? Is that video evidence that the Illuminati elite is in bed with at least one ancient extraterrestrial race, hidden in plain sight, and pulling the strings of mankind?
The revelation that the ever-growing missing persons reports were somehow connected to alien abduction phenomenon seemed ludicrous to me. There was something inside of me, an inert feeling to repel the information, and I didn't know why. As a researcher and journalist, it is built into my psyche to question everything I'm told. When I raised my doubts about this one evening in a taped conversation with X, I could never have prepared myself for what happened.
Sorry, but I can't have you screaming like a little girl, so you've got to promise me you'll be quiet. If I wanted to harm you, you would be harmed. John, please, sit.
It was in 2000 that I first discovered David Icke's book, The Biggest Secret. In it, he writes about a global conspiracy, a hidden hand manipulating humanity's destiny through the shadows, using those who seem to be in power. And the goal of these shadow people? Nothing less than an Orwellian global superstate with total control at the hands of an ancient reptilian shape-shifting race.
In simple terms, there is a predator race which take a reptilian form. They're feeding off humanity. They've turned humanity into a slave race. They demand human sacrifice. That's where Satanism comes in. They feed off human energy, particularly feed off the energy of children.
Reptilians and the Illuminati. One of the most well-known secret societies is the Illuminati, and according to some theorists, they are controlled by the Dracos. This idea was put forward by a man named Stuart Serdlow, who claims he was a survivor of the Montauk Project. In his book, Blue Blood, True Blood, Conflict and Creation, he claims that there are 13 royal families of the Illuminati. The leader of the Illuminati is called the Pindar, which is shortened from Pinnacle of the Draco, and is a purebred reptile. According to Swerdlow, the Pindar is the head of the Rothschild family, who has been the Pindar for centuries. The 12 other families, all of them incredibly powerful, influential and rich, have different areas of expertise, and they control global finances, military technology and development, mind control, religion, and all the media. All 13 of the ruling families are full-blooded reptilians, but the class of individuals who support the 13 families, called the Committee of 300, are not. In fact, some of them do not even have any reptilian DNA, though most do. The Committee of 300 supports the 13 families by controlling the organizations like the NSA, CIA, Interpol, and the Mafia, just to name a few.
Now, as far as the reptilians are concerned, once the Muria sank, they went underground, and I told you about the hybridization program. That began in Sumer. That was one of the first places that the human-reptilian DNA mix for the shape-shifting reptilians began. And they also colonized India, China, and Japan. Now, in Sumer and Babylon, this is where the hybridization of the reptilians and the humans went into full force. It was here that they created a unique hybridization blend of 50% genetics reptilian, 50% genetics human. These then became what was known as the blue bloods. Who became the royalty of the earth. They call them blue bloods because their bloodstreams have a high copper content. When copper oxidizes, it turns blue or green color. When iron blood oxidizes, it turns red or brown. The royalty of the earth call themselves the Illuminati. In Latin, it means the enlightened ones, or the illuminated ones. Officially, this group began in 1776, created in Bavaria by a man by the name of Adam Weishaupt. That's the official creation of the Illuminati. He put together this organization in Bavaria to pull together wealthy nobility and royalty. Now that is an interesting date, 1776, because what else happened that year? Declaration of Independence and the creation of the United States of America, which, by the way, which I'll explain to you in a moment, is not even a country. And so, the Illuminati finally in 1776 decided to come out of the woodwork to make themselves known publicly, when in fact they existed from day zero. Really, they existed in their present form from the days of Sumer and Babylon. And they worshipped a pair of deities, a male and female. Male was called Nimrod. And the female was called Semiramis. I will tell you that the number 13 is very significant to the Illuminati, because in the last 500 years or so, also even last 1,000 years, there are 13 families that control this planet. 13 was also the number of colonies of the United States originally. 13 is also the age when the ancient Hebrews said that children become adults, what they call a bar mitzvah. And 13 is actually the true number of zodiac signs. One sign has been deleted for the past 1,000 years or more. And that sign was located between Scorpio and Sagittarius. And can you imagine what the symbol of that zodiac sign was? It was a dragon, a reptile. That's the 13th zodiac sign. 13 is significant. Do you want to know the names of these 13 families? I'm going to give it to you. But I need to tell you something else. 13 is at the top of the pyramid of families. Beneath them is called the Committee of 300. Those are 300 families who are descended from those original 13 who form the next level of their control pyramid. But the 13 are as follows. These are the families. Some of the names you will recognize, some you will not. Some of them you can remember or recognize, some you may not be so familiar with. Where I had flashes, the Sinclairs are also spelled St. Clair. The Rothschilds were originally known as the Bowers. The Warburgs were originally known as Del Banco, hence the name bank or banking. The Windsors, the proper British family, actually are German and changed their name in World War I so that people wouldn't think that they were German. But their real name is Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. And same thing with Cavendish, whose sublevels are called the Kennedys. Some of these people are in public power right now, and some are not. The Plantagenet family has its center in France, but also sent emissaries or colonies to Scotland and Ireland. Hanover, of course, is a big German city with that name. Everyone knows about the Rothschilds, which is a German derivation of Rothschild, which means the red shield, hence the Red Cross, which you see almost every day, which is also on the flag of Switzerland, which is also not a real country. The Krupps, oh yes, the Krupps, claim to fame, they built the ovens in the concentration camp, and all of the machinations for the Nazi Empire. The de Medicis, you know, Italian family, very well known in banking. Romanovs, Russian royalty. My great uncle had the great distinction of having them assassinated in 1917. The Rockefellers, you know, were actually German. Kennedys, of course, you know, Cavendish, same thing. And the Habsburgs, who are the royalty of Austria. These families control everything in your life. Every single thing in your life.
You didn't make a comment about the Bruce.
Oh yes, the Bruce, one of the strongest families in Scotland. What movie was made about them? Braveheart. I happen to know one of their descendants who interviewed me for a book she's writing. Oh, and by the way, all of these are shape-shifting reptilians. Every single one of them. They can shapeshift into reptilian form. They have a 50-50 split of human reptilian DNA. Most of you have more of a 90-10 split. You all have reptilian DNA. But once you approach this, you are a blue blood. You are royalty, the global elite, the rulers of the New World Order. And you shapeshift. And you need to do ceremony, including blood ritual and hormone intake of human beings in order to maintain a human form. Beneath this group, this 13 families, is the of 300. The Committee of 300 is the next layer in this pyramid of control. And guess where you all are? At the bottom layer. And isn't it interesting that on the US dollar is a pyramid with an eye watching everything that's underneath the pyramid? Now how do they explain that Egyptian Sumerian symbol on a US dollar? Do they explain it when you're in school? No. Do they say why there is an eye watching everything? No. What does the eye represent? The eye represents, if you remember, Osiris, the all-seeing eye, which goes back to the reptilian sun god of Nimrod. And it is a sun god because reptilians worship sun, and one of their symbols is a blazing sun. And you've seen them all over the place. Okay, sometimes they look like flames coming out of the sun, but in fact, it's in the center of the Argentinian flag, where the winged reptilians are. They're all over the place if you keep your eyes open. Now, in addition to this symbol being on the US dollar, those of you who have a dollar left in your wallet, if you look underneath, where it used to say e pluribus unum, it now says Novus Ordem Seclorum, which means New World Order. Also, by the way, if you're interested in some of the names of this Committee of 300, I'll just give you a sample. One of the names, which you may not recognize, is called Agnelli. Agnelli, and they own the Fiat Corporation. And they tell the Italian government what to do. There is also the Spencers, Carringtons, Norman, Ford, Taft, Roosevelt, Russell, Stewart spelled both ways with a U and an EW, Seaton, Hamilton, Campbell, Bush, Douglas, Montgomery, Balliol, Graham, Lindsay, Cameron, Wilson, Morgan, Harriman, Carnegie, Mellon, Oppenheimer, Rhodes, Hines, Savoy, Schiff, Kuhn, Loeb, Coolidge, and Delano. These are just samples of the Committee of 300 surnames that are being used. These shape-shifting people do their ceremony. It always involves the use of human blood and hormones, because when you are trying to maintain a particular form, you need to intake the genetics of that form to maintain the integrity of it. Otherwise, you regress to your original form, which in their case would be reptilian. And you've heard the old stories, and there's even been movies and comedy made out of it, where there are these wealthy families in Europe, or even royalty, who have this family member that's locked away in a dungeon or in a tower because he's very strange. And whenever the people who are guests in the castle or the building go to look, they find this gigantic reptilian-like creature living locked away. It's because he reverted back to the original form and did not shapeshift any longer. He got stuck in the reptilian form. And as it's turning out, as the centuries are going by and the interbreeding and the intermarriage continues, they're finding it more and more difficult to maintain a human form. And so they're doing more and more ceremony on what is called the morphogenetic grid. And I know many of you have heard of this before. The Earth is very much like a body. Just like you have a chakra system and you have the meridians that come out of the chakra system, the Earth has energy centers and ley lines that come out of the energy centers and crisscross like a grid or a matrix. And on certain places where they intersect, there is a powerful energy vortex created. And that grid or that matrix of energy around the Earth is called the morphogenetic grid. And the reason the word genetic is in it is because it resonates to the occupants of the planet, so that there's a connection between the energy of the Earth and the energy of the humans or creatures that live on it, creating an interlocking unit called morphogenetic grid.
Fasten your seatbelts. I want to give you a little bit of a background to those of you who are not familiar with me, and there are some new people here. I did work in the government for over 25 years. I spent 13 of those years at the Montauk Project from 1970 to 1983. And that project did involve mind control, genetic manipulation, and then moved on into other bizarre experimentations is time travel, weaponry research, and weather control, which is well underway now and quite established. As for my history, why I was involved in this, why me particularly, they look for people with certain type of genetics, people who have a predisposition for mental activities that you would call psychic or otherwise. Also has to do with my great uncle being the first president of the Soviet Union and my family being involved in government activity on both sides of the Atlantic ever since that time. A lot of history, if not almost 100% of history, and what you've learned in school that is completely false. Ideas, scenarios, events that have either been made up completely or that have been changed or altered in some way to fit the agenda of those who control the planet. The history of the Earth, as you know, is millions of years old. In actuality, the story of human beings on the Earth is very short in comparison. It's less than 1 million years old. And the original colonists on this planet, again, I'm condensing a lot because you can read about it in that book, were reptilian beings. Reptilians represent about 25% of the population of this galaxy. Human life form represents about 70% of the life forms in this particular galaxy, and then 5% are other types of beings of various proportions. Now understand, even though that's only 5% as far as other type of creatures are concerned, if you think that in this galaxy alone there are an estimated 100 billion stars, and then extrapolate that to where in the physical universe there are approximately 100 billion galaxies, and if you do the math, it's astronomical, the number of star systems that exist. And if only 0.1% of all of those stars had intelligent life, that would still be millions of civilizations, and then times that by the infinite realities that exist. In other words, alternate universes. So it's mind-boggling to imagine how many different civilizations are out there. Interestingly enough, on this little planet, in this sector, there's only a couple of interactions compared to all those millions of civilizations. This different kinds of information. Misinformation is simply misinterpreted knowledge or information that has not been understood correctly, like an honest mistake. Disinformation is a lie sandwich. That's when you have a lie in the middle with two truths on the end, or two lies on the end and a truth in the middle. but you get hooked in by the truth part, and so you think that the whole rest of it is also true. And that's what the government and all the governments of the earth do when they give out information to the public. It's always disinformation.
What's worse? Which is worse, permissive?
Well, in my opinion, both are not the best. They're not good, either one of them. But the worst, I imagine, if you want to use that terminology, would be the disinformation, because it's purposely given so that you won't get the whole information. You won't understand it completely, and you'll get hooked and skewered in the wrong direction. So it's a deception. When he took office after that fake election, what did he give everybody as a little symbol when he took office? A little three-horned god. And the caption says, I have the original over there, it says, that's a salute. He gave the crowd a salute. That's a three-horned god.
His reptilian antlers a salute?
He is a reptilian. He's a shapeshifter. I didn't get to that part yet. But Clinton did this also in his inauguration. It's called the Devil's Salute. They go like this. This are the horns of the devil. This is the face of the devil. And they go like that. And this is Clinton here doing that. And if you go through every inauguration, there's a picture of every one of the presidents doing this. Every single one of them.
Organizations that are affected with mind control, that we cannot be misled into believing that it's just one particular group of people or another. We can't even say that this is Democrats or Republicans. This has nothing to do with party lines. What it has to do with is a New World Order agenda. When I was under mind control, before I was rescued and my mind and my memory restored, I was totally robotic. I had no ability to think for myself. I had no ability to question or to reason. I could only do exactly what I was told to do. One thing that I was told to do was to attend a White House cocktail party. This was during the Reagan-Bush administration while Ronald Reagan was president. It was on one occasion in particular that I heard Ronald Reagan talking with then Prime Minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney, who was also involved in this New World Order effort. And he said at that time that he believed the only way to world peace is through mind control of the masses. This is terrifying in proportion, especially when, having experienced mind control, I know that there is no peace of mind under mind control. Without free thought, there's no free will. Without God-given free will, there's no spiritual expression. And I wonder, what kind of a so-called world peace can we have where people have no peace of mind, where they have no spiritual expression, when they're not even in touch with their own identity? Or it's very frightening in proportion when we consider the ramifications of what all mind control entails and how anyone can justify a robotic society under the so-called world peace guise, which is actually the New World Order, world dominance. I experienced that Ronald Reagan took orders directly from George Bush. George Bush was one of the highest up that I'm aware of, if not the highest up that I was ever exposed to during the course of. And then by everything that I witnessed and experienced, it was George Bush who was in control of our country through 3 administrations, because Ronald Reagan answers to George Bush. Then George Bush was in office himself. And after that, Bill Clinton went into office. And I heard Bill Clinton and George Bush once discussing how when the American populace became disillusioned with Republicans in control of our country, bringing us into the New World Order, that Bill Clinton, as a Democrat, would be put into office. And it was also my experience to have witnessed Bill Clinton answering to George Bush. So we certainly...
She also claims that Bill Clinton was under mind control. in covertly recorded off-air transmissions from the Bush-Clinton presidential election campaign in the 1990s, we can see that Bill Clinton was nothing more than a puppet to the puppet masters which placed him in the White House. Bill Clinton's demeanor seems to be similar to a person who is under a hypnotic trance.
And stood for certain propositions that would make America strong and healthy and grow the middle class and shrink poverty and stand against communism. And after 1989, President Bush said, and it was a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order, that we needed a new world order.
That they knew about the terrorist attacks before it happened. What they don't show you is on French television, they are saying that the President of the United States and the government set the whole thing up, and that they're all lying. Of course, what happened to some of the people who believed in that in the French elections recently? They're out. And so, leads me to the next important point, and that is what happened on September 11th. What was that all about? Now, I must say that President Bush deserves an Emmy Award because he really played it well. Complete with the tears and the nervousness and all that stuff. Of course, he doesn't really have to go too far to act.
Richard Bruce here. I want to talk a little bit about 9/11, and I want to say that I feel that there will be no justice and no understanding until we open our minds to the fact that there are things happening here which we cannot believe or understand, but it is connected directly to non-humans. Until we open up our mind that there are non-humans living among us, we are not going to understand what is happening here. This is really important. I realized that the UFO cover-up is connected to the 9/11 mystery. And I'm going to explain that in a minute. But first, I want to say that how we know that there is something suspicious about 9/11 that leads to the fact that there are non-humans is that there's no explanation for all the people involved in this complex operation that should have wives and families and so forth. All the people in the White House, all the people in the military, all the people in the air traffic control centers who had to have known what they were doing and or should have spoken out afterwards if they knew, defies the fact of human control over the situation. Somebody, some patriot, some decent person involved should have said, hey, wait a minute, we're not going to kill thousands and thousands of our own people, are we? Okay, let's take, for instance, the fighter jets that were scrambled and apparently sent to the wrong place.
So, die hat jede Maus auf dem Radarschirm. Und in der Regel ist es so, in den NATO-Staaten geregelt, dass man zwischen 10 und 50 Minuten nach Alarmauslösung muss man in der Luft sein. Und genau dieses ist über 2 Stunden nicht passiert. Es hat nicht ein einziger Abfangjäger den Versuch gemacht, so eine Maschine abzudrängen oder überhaupt aufzuklären oder sonst irgendwas. Und diese Nebelkerzen, die hier geworfen worden sind, auch vom Untersuchungsausschuss des amerikanischen Kongresses, dass an dem Tag eben unglaublich viele Übungen der Luftwaffe stattgefunden hätten und dass man völlig verwirrt gewesen sei und gar nicht mehr unterscheiden könnte zwischen Real Life und Übung, das ist schlicht und einfach für jemanden, der aus der Luftwaffe kommt, nicht nachvollziehbar. Ja? Denn Übungsgeschehen sind, was die Flugsicherung angeht und die Luftverteidigung angeht, immer getrennt vom realen Leben des Flugverkehrs.
Nachdem die Fragen der Presse nach den Abfangjägern, nach der Verteidigung immer schärfer wurden, wurde dann gesagt, doch, da seien Abfangjäger gestartet. Behauptungen, dass sie gestartet seien, Behauptungen, dass sie unheimlich schnell geflogen seien, Behauptungen, dass sie aus irgendwelchen unerfindlichen Gründen, die mir überhaupt nicht erklärlich sind, nicht gewusst hätten, wo sie hätten hinfliegen sollen, Behauptungen, dass man sie deswegen einfach mal zum Meer hinausgeschickt hätte.
Now, this was done on purpose, very clearly. And the question is, if there were people in the military that had to have known about this, why would they have consented to it? I mean, can it really be that they're all so guilty or all so evil that they would actually perpetrate this to their fellow human beings and murder their own citizens? Knowingly, because they would have to understand why they were doing what they were doing in order to think about all the people in the military and in the commercial flight control centers, in the flight towers, had to have had access to the control panels and the radar to see where these planes were headed and what was going on. And everybody there had to have been in on the operation because somebody would have said something by now. I mean, somebody would have said, hey, you know, I was in there and I saw this irregularity and I said, how can this possibly be that we sent the jets to the wrong location? Too many people, especially with expertise requiring skills such as those who planted the time explosives that fell the Twin Towers and Building 7, too many people with this type of competency and awareness involved in the operation to not have come forward and said, you know, hey, wait a minute, or objected and said, hey, wait a minute. So this leaves a big mystery as to how they got all these people to cooperate with it and maintain silence afterwards. And in my mind, it requires a beyond normal explanation. Let's just say, for a bare bones minimum, I mean, the utmost least number of people would be 50, and I think that's really too low. I would say more like 100 to, or more, of people involved in this operation, involved in the planning, had to have clearance to be part of whatever it was, to, think about the communications that might have been intercepted by the NSA or the White House, if they're not all centrally controlled anyway. So the question becomes, how did they control all these people? Or are they all, reptilians? Just consider this. We still, to this day, really, if you understand that, do not know who did this, and we do not know why they did it, and we do not know all the facts about how they did it. We know some of the facts of how they did it. So we don't know the who, the what, or the why. And there are big, big questions about the who and the why that I believe, if you narrow it down, you just cannot get away from the non-human aspect of it.
And another thing you should know, that several weeks before the September 11th attack, the leaders of the Taliban visited Bush in his Texas ranch.
It was in the news.
Was it?
Weeks ago, yeah.
And he gave them $30 million a day. Now what's up with that ranch anyway? Why do our world leaders all of a sudden have to visit him in the Texas ranch? Perhaps it has a nicer ceremonial ritual room than the White House does. Now, I received information from somebody I know in Texas and Austin just a couple of days ago, And I can't tell you how they found out about it, but I know that it's good information. And they said they know of workers, Mexican workers, who were 7 levels underneath the ranch working on construction. That is connected way down into those tunnel systems that crisscross the earth. What happened on September 11th that they admitted first time on the news? When I first started coming here and going other places, I told everyone that the earth is crisscrossed with tunnels and that there are many underground bases all over North America as well as in other parts of the world. And I also said to you that West Virginia was practically hollow underneath, and that the largest city in the world is located under West Virginia. Well, lo and behold, that afternoon of September 11th, when Bush was being taken away in security, they announced on CNN that he will probably be going to the base underground in West Virginia. First time I almost fell off my seat when I heard that. Only said it once. Then they said just a few weeks ago, guess what? We have a shadow government. Now, I've been using that term for a long time, so have other people, and everyone said, how ridiculous is that? Well, now they admitted it. But they admitted it in such a way that everyone said, oh, thank God there's a shadow government, because if they blow up Washington, at least there'll be people living under the ground somewhere that will be running the place. So thank God that there's a shadow government. That's how they, brilliant actually, how they release the information in a way that you're so grateful that it's so. They'll be able to cut your head off and you write them a thank you letter. There's a country and western song that says, they're billing me for killing me. And it's the truth. And so, they're admitting all these things step by step. It happens that your Vice President, Dick Cheney, owns a corporation that builds pipelines. And the pipeline that he wanted to build was across Afghanistan and goes all the way to Turkey and brings oil from other parts of the Middle East. So he has a lot to gain by occupying that area. Also about Dick Cheney. Well, a couple of things. Some of you may have read a book by a former sex slave who wrote a book called Transformation of America. Trance, T-R-A-N-C-E, Formation of America. Have you read that book or heard of it? And she wrote in there that Dick Cheney was one of her handlers or controllers, and that he was quite an evil man. Now, a while ago, a few years ago, I had done a lecture in Denver at the Global Sciences, and I happened to meet the wife of one of the state senators of Wyoming, where Dick Cheney is from. And she told me she knows Dick Cheney personally. He's come to her house, she's had dinner with, he's friends with her husband, and she said he's a horrible, horrible man. And she said if anybody knew what was going on underneath Wyoming, they just would not be able to believe it. And that came from the senator's wife, who, by the way, just wrote to me before I came here. So I haven't opened that email yet. And so, it has a lot to do also with the Denver airport. How many of you have been there, the new Denver airport? Not too many of you. The old Denver airport was quite nice. It was near town. Then they closed it up, and they built a new one 50 miles away, with only one road to get to it. And you can only get in if they scan your license plate coming in and out. And the runways are set up in the form of swastikas. And in the stained glass windows are swastikas. And the whole thing is designed like a tent. It looks like a tent, this gigantic tent in the middle of nowhere. And when you get out of the gate, when you leave your aircraft, and you're on the floor is embedded little reptilian creatures. In the tile, how many of you saw that? And there's words written, strange words in a strange language. And people think it's Indian language, but no Indian language that we know of. Nobody knows what they mean. And there's a big plaque in front of in the airport that says, dedicated to the people of Denver by the New World Airport Society. Now, at baggage claim 17, there is a mural about the size of this wall, and on that mural is a picture of a black woman, a Hispanic woman, a Jewish woman, an Oriental woman, and an Indian woman lying dead in their coffins holding dead babies. And standing above them with a sword in lederhosen is a little blonde boy with blue eyes. You could go see it. There's a picture of it here, but it's very small. It's very small. I'll try to find that for you. But it's right there in the open. Oh. Yeah, you can see, I don't know if you can see, they took little pieces of it. You can come up later and look at it. But it's, yeah, here's the women lying in their coffins. And there's a little boy with the sword, the blonde boy. And, oh yes, there's also a picture of a skull, a man in a Nazi war suit and a skull with a sword trying to kill people. This is at the airport, while you're getting your luggage. Yeah, very pleasant.
So what's the subliminal messages behind
The subliminal, and
And what it's all about is that the blood and the menstrual blood contains something that is important for the propagation of this race that is controlling things on this planet. They're called the Illuminati. And the Illuminati are actually run by these 13 bloodlines, which are all of the royal families in Europe and in England. And they need the blood because they are, in fact, not human. They take human shape. They are reptilians. And they need the blood. The blood helps them maintain their reptilian shape, and it helps them maintain their sanity, and it helps them to live in this world because they are not from this world. But what they need is, for it to be secreted in the blood, is they need terrorization of their victims before they are killed for their blood. And they have to terrorize them to get this to come out in the blood and be secreted in the blood. They are killed at that moment as they are staring into their eyes, and not only they can't hold their shape when this happens. The
human shape.
The human shape they cannot hold. They go back into reptilian shape as this is happening, because it's like an animalistic type of excitement. Oftentimes they will just rip into the victim and eviscerate them and start eating the flesh of this person too, and the fat from the intestinal area is highly valued, as they use it on their skin. And they will drink, and they drink the blood, and the blood is highly sought after, and it goes according also to rank within these creatures. Reptilians arrived here and again began to take over, and they instilled themselves in different places underground in the earth, and also this one part of them, the ruling part, took over and became involved in the politics and in the religion, and started controlling through these means at that point in time. Reptilian that come from another dimension, they actually they materialize from out of another dimension and are present at rituals, and they are so powerful, and their presence is there's such an evilness, and they are what Christianity would have called the demons.
So take us through one of these rituals that you conducted at the highest level of this global brotherhood. What would happen?
And then they have these children that they're kidnapping and bringing in from other countries, and no one misses them because these are third world countries. And children they have the most energy, the purest energy, they're the highest form of sacrifice. They are used as actual blood sacrifices during these rituals because of, again, reptilians needing their blood. The blood will be gathered in a goblet, and it will be dispersed among the reptilians.
Are these rituals rare? I mean, how many are there that, say, go on a year? I mean, we talking hundreds or thousands?
There are things happening every month of the year.
What happens on the night of Halloween?
That night is about the worship and homage to Satan, the great deceiver Satan, on that night, on Halloween, at this church.
You've conducted them in Europe and the United States. Can we start with the United States?
Yes. Yes. I have seen at rituals, I have seen George Bush. I have seen Madeleine Albright. I have seen Henry Kissinger. I have seen Ronald Reagan. And I have also, by the way, seen his wife, Nancy Reagan. I have seen Hillary Clinton before I knew she was Hillary Clinton at the time. At these rituals, she is involved. The other people that I have named and I have seen shapeshift into reptilians. J. Rockefeller, and he shapeshifts. These people seem to all be connected to the Illuminati. Gerald Ford, I have seen shapeshift. Dr. Joseph Mengele, who took me around to these rituals a lot of the time, was also a shapeshifter. There are people in the European countries that I've seen shapeshift and be involved. The Queen there, I've seen Princess Margaret there, I've seen Charles there, and they shapeshift. I have seen Tony Blair there, and he shapeshifts. They all have their quirks as to how they act, even in their reptilian form.
What have you seen the royal family do, the Queen Mother, and the other people you've seen in the rituals? What have you seen them do?
I've seen all of them drink human blood and consume human flesh, and they have their own goblets in which they have blood, and these goblets are encrusted with jewels. And they also have their own daggers, and that the dagger goes into the goblet. Wear these robes, but they don't wear anything underneath the robes, because what is going to happen, what the rituals are all about, they're going to shapeshift, and they can't have anything on under the robes. And there are orgy kind of things that go on at the rituals also. And
involving the royal family of Britain?
Yes, involving the royal family of Britain, and the sacrifice and the eating of, consuming the sacrifice, and they are involved in that.
And you've seen them do that?
Yes, I have seen them do that.
People in Britain, listening to what you're saying, would obviously be staggered, I guess anywhere in the world, but what would stagger them mostly is, in Britain, the Queen Mother has an image of being the nation's grandmother. The nice old lady, and good old Queen Mum, what a lovely lady. What's your experience of the Queen Mother?
She is very cold in reality, and she is very cruel. She obviously, from what I see, enjoys consuming human flesh. It's sickening.
Do they go into a different state in terms of age and strength and all these other attributes when they actually shapeshift?
Yes, the human body that they choose to occupy or take when it was young, it ages, but when they take the reptilian form, these reptilians live hundreds of years, and so they have to have taken more than one human body to live in. A lot of them are much, much older, and I'm including the Queen Mother in this, older than people think that she is. She's been in more than one body, human form. And when the time comes, if it is time for her to go on, it has been chosen that she still has, it's known that she still has life or years to go, again, she will be put into the body, the essence of her, and the reptilian form will go, or the essence of her will go into another body that is also has the ability to shapeshift into reptilian form.
One of the pure reptilian human bloodlines?
Yes.
What happens when, take the Queen Mother as an example, what happens when they shapeshift? I mean, what do you see?
You start to see changes happen, and they're happening so fast that it's almost, it's the closest thing that I've seen to it is what they're now doing with computer technology. It's just a literal transformation that happens very quickly, and they get taller and they get bigger, and they don't look at all as reptilians like they do as humans, and thus the wearing of the robes, because if they were in clothes, the clothes would be torn apart.
So let's take the Queen Mother on this subject as an example. We recognize her as a frail old lady. What does she look like when she shapeshifts at these rituals?
She has, she looks like, the nose portion gets very much longer, and it grows into kind of a snout kind of thing. She has little fangs, teeth, and there's a tongue. And they all seem to have this kind of tongue when they're at this level. The tongue has a lot of long, hairy or pointed projections coming out of it. It's very long. And they have these, they don't have hands or feet, they have these claws, and they have scales, and also scales that seem to kind of disappear into one another. But it's more pronounced on the back. There seem to be lumps or protrusions coming from the head. There seem to be some kind of growth appendages at where, on the back, and they seem folded, and not all of them have that. And there is a tail, and they a lot of times will keep the tail curled, and and I've seen her when she's very displeased with something, as I've seen other members like this. This tail is whipped around, very agitated, and they do, and she hisses. The eyes usually they're large. They look like they're very round, and they look like they're coming out of their sockets, and very protruding, and usually the color ranges from a beige to a gold to a dark greenish gold, and then there's this dark slit up and down, a vertical slit, and and the eyes will look hooded. And when they look hooded, it's a very frightening thing, because it seems that when the eyes are hooded, they're about to do something.
What do you mean by hooded?
The lids come down, and it's almost, I guess it would be the same thing in a human as an expression of someone's got an idea.
And how tall are they when they shapeshift?
They're just about 7 feet tall. Some are a little shorter, or to a foot shorter. Some are a little bit taller than 7 feet.
What is it about the rituals that allow the shapeshifting to happen?
When the victims are starting to be sacrificed, it's the scent of the blood, and they start shape-shifting at that point in time, and they can hardly wait to get to the blood. It's like they're addicted to the blood, and then the consumption of human flesh that follows.
What have you seen the Queen or any of the royal family do in relation to that? Have you seen them sacrifice and consume human flesh?
There are certain times when they will actually do a sacrifice, or there will have been someone doing a sacrifice, and it's not happening fast enough for them. So they will step in and finish it themselves, because the ritual has to be gone through. It's sacrificially, ritualistically, it has to have been gone through, and they will step right in and just start tearing the throat out, and they're getting all this blood from the jugular vein at the same time, and that has happened when there are many there that are going to be sacrificed, and they just can't wait, and tearing into the contents of the abdomen and stomach of a victim afterwards.
Who have you seen do that?
I've seen the Queen Mother do that, and Prince Philip and Charles. I've seen Guy de Rothschild do this. It seems that I've seen it more among royalty or so-called royalty do this than people that are not titled. That they don't seem to. They seem like it feels like they don't dare. But they shapeshift nonetheless. But it's like the royals that step in and just start tearing away as they can hardly wait.
How long can they hold the reptilian form in these occasions?
During the rituals, it's much easier for them to hold their reptilian form. They can stay in that form. What it is that they have a hard time holding their human form. And as long as they're around blood and the scent of blood, they can't hold human form.
Was there any way, when Diana was married to Charles, without attending a blood ritual, that she could have seen him or one of the others become a reptile?
They have a tendency when they're asleep to shapeshift, and not. They have to consciously hold their form, and when they're asleep, they have a tendency to not hold human form and to shapeshift into reptilian. That scent of blood would tend to cause a momentary shapeshift.
Their goal. The biggest question surrounding the reptilian conspiracy theory is why would they do it?